Hi, this is Steffi and welcome to the FinancialFox Bitcoin Series. On the show today, I have somebody that doesn't need an introduction, somebody that has been in Bitcoin almost since the beginning. He's a true OG of Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin developer and entrepreneur. He's one of the few true expert in the space. Is a programmer with over 20 years of experience, an open source contributor to many different Bitcoin projects, and author of 4 Bitcoin books, and an active ambassador and educator of Bitcoin. Jimmy Song is going to join us on the show, and he's sharing his insight, his views on Bitcoin, on the Bitcoin ecosystem. We talk some controversial stuff, and it was an enlightening conversation, and I hope it's going to be for you as well. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, click the subscribe button now and follow us on social media to stay up to date with our news and interviews. Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
I'm good. Good to be on your show.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. So you are an OG, let's say. You are one of the Bitcoin pioneers. So I think your views on Bitcoin and on the Bitcoin ecosystem will be very valuable for all our viewers. So shall we perhaps start with the $1 billion question? No, I'm joking. With a very important question. When did you buy your first Bitcoin?
I first learned about Bitcoin back in 2011, and I'm a programmer by trade. I've been programming since I was like 9 years old. So it's very much in my blood. And I first saw a news article about Bitcoin in 2011, and it was on a tech website called Slashdot. And as soon as I learned about it, once I saw the news article, I was like, what the heck is this thing? I looked into it, found out about the 21 million limit, and almost immediately I wanted to buy some. Unfortunately, back in February of 2011, there weren't that many great ways to go get Bitcoin. In fact, the only couple of ways that I could Google were some guy that was selling it via PayPal, and his account on PayPal had been shut down. And this exchange called Mt. Gox, and it was running out of Japan. So getting dollars over to Japan is not an easy process. In fact, what you had to do was open an account with a money transmission service called Dwala. Link your bank account there, deposit money into Dwala, and only then could you make a link from that account to a newly opened Mt. Gox account. And at that point, you can transfer dollars over to the Mt. Gox account, and then you can go buy some. So that whole process, if it sounds cumbersome, it's because it was. And I got started on it, but I got lazy, and I was like, this is taking too long. I have to verify this and verify that. It was taking too long, so I just sort of forgot about it. And that was February of 2011, and the price at which I could have bought was $1, and I did not buy at $1 because it was too annoying. One of the biggest regrets in my life. And like most people, I have my regret story. Everyone has their regret story. They wish they could have gotten in when they first heard about it. It's just how it is. That summer, it went all the way from $1 to something like $30 before crashing due to something that happened on Mt. Gox. And it was at that point I had some of this stuff set up already from my adventures in February. So I decided, okay, you know what, I should really get some of this stuff just in case. So I bought my first Bitcoin, later that year, late 2011, basically. But that's the answer to your question.
Wow. So you mentioned about the supply. So that is what caught your attention, right? So what is, if I ask you the nature of Bitcoin, what is your answer?
Well, I would say it's decentralized digital scarcity, and all of those words mean something. So decentralized, as in there's no central controller. All the fiat money, in fact, all the altcoins that you think of, they're all centralized. Somebody is in charge. Somebody created it. Somebody brought into being. Somebody controls the supply, the policy, and all the other stuff. That's centralized. Something like gold is decentralized because it occurs in nature and you can go and gather it to your heart's content if you know where it is and you own the rights to that area. But if you don't, then you're going to have to go and buy some from other people. But that ends up being good because to go and mine Bitcoin, to go and mine gold is actually fairly expensive, and the cost to mine gold tends to trend towards exactly the price of gold itself. So it's only like a very small margin for most gold mining companies. So if gold is at $2,000, then they can probably mine 1 ounce of gold for like $1,900 or $1,950 or something like that. So it ends up being a very specialty business anyway. So decentralized things sort of have that property. And finally, it's scarce. Lots of things are decentralized, but they're not scarce at all. So salt used to be money back when it was scarce, and you could only really get it by drying large amounts of salt water and then taking that and filtering it and so forth. It's not used as money anymore because they figured out industrial processes to make lots and lots of salt. At least when I was growing up, it was like 10 cents for a big thing of salt. It certainly wasn't that way all through time. But that's the key thing. It's decentralized, digital, and scarce. And that digital part is what gives it so much of its power. If it's not digital, if it's physical, like salt or gold or any of these other things, it has a tendency to degrade. So if you use another element other than gold that's not as durable, say like iron or something like that, ends up not being very good money because it rusts and it goes bad. And if you use like pineapples for money, it goes bad too because pineapples don't last very long. The digital part also makes it very easy to transport. Even back in the days of the gold standard and stuff, you had to transport a lot of money around. The treasure ships of yesteryear that used to go and trade with far off places, if they sank, all that gold went down to the bottom of the sea. And the reason why that was because they had to actually carry the gold with them for the trading that they wanted to do. So, that portability of digital things is extremely useful. It's been a long time since I've sent like a handwritten letter via mail to somebody, mostly because it's slow, right? It takes like 3 days to get there. You can send an email and it'll get there in like 3 minutes or much less oftentimes, and it's extremely useful for that reason. And having that ability with money, and to be fair, this is something that fiat currencies have, is this ability to transfer money very quickly. So if you pay for something online on Amazon, say with a credit card, it's very quick. In fact, it's the speed of a click, and that is a very useful thing. So decentralized, digital, and scarce. No other thing has ever had all three of these properties, and that's what makes Bitcoin so incredibly powerful, and makes for some very interesting changes to the economy as a result.
So, because when you said, right, I bought the first Bitcoin because I saw the 20 million, then I said, why you didn't buy like a painting or, a glass of wine, a bottle of very rare wine. But if I understand correctly, is because of the digital aspect and the decentralized and the scarce altogether.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you did buy like a painting or something like that, it's not very good money. It might be a decent investment. In fact, a lot of art can be a very good investment. But also a lot of art isn't a very good investment, right? Like a painting from a Rembrandt painting does, appreciates over time or has appreciated over time pretty well. But another painter that was his contemporary that no one knows, that didn't do very well. Like Rembrandts aren't fungible. One Rembrandt is very different than another painting, and so on. The other thing is it's not very divisible either. You can't pay for things with Rembrandt, because whatever it is priced at, that's what you have to kind of trade it for. With Bitcoin, you get very fine divisibility. And, if you do get something that's digital and centralized, like, I don't know, like a World of Warcraft gold or something like that, you're under the control of whoever issued that item. So the Blizzard Corporation, has issued a lot of World of Warcraft gold. So at some point, it was worth a lot more than it is now, because they've inflated the economy. They have a monetary policy based on the game, where if there aren't enough ways for players to spend it, then the entire economy of World of Warcraft sort of inflates with that gold. So you have to be kind of careful with that, because you don't want to be under the control of a centralized entity that can essentially inflate away whatever scarcity that you perceive to have in the beginning. Mm-hmm. The thing is, there really aren't that many scarce assets in the world. You might think there are, like by saying, hey, there's this painting, a Rembrandt or something like that. The thing is, it's not nearly as scarce as you think. If it's an artist that's still alive, then they can always make more of it. In fact, a lot of modern art suffers from this very problem, where they'll make like 2 or 3 pieces that are very popular and have a very high valuation, and that artist will just go and generate more of it because they want to capture a lot of that value. And it's no longer that scarce. Even dead artists, there's a whole scandal in the art world where they've examined the paintings to such a fine degree that they'll make up paintings that are very similar, and no one can really tell the difference. It's very hard to verify whether or not what you're buying is actually an original and actually scarce. So there are all these other problems that come along with scarce assets that honestly are very difficult to solve, and Bitcoin has managed to solve all of them because it is perfectly verifiable. All you have to do is run your own node, and you know for a fact that it's real Bitcoin, and you don't have to trust in some other authority to tell you whether or not it's real. Even with something like gold, it's very difficult to tell what carat the gold that you get is.
100%.
You need like a touchstone. And you need chemical tests. It's verifiability is not easy. So
I tell you something. I was in India and I got sold this ring that's supposed to be gold and supposed to be diamond, and was beautiful. And then I come back, and after 5 years, it kind of it loses yellow, and the diamond, actually, they are diamond, but it wasn't gold. It was kind of like another material, and you pay money, you never go and get it checked, and then it's true. It's true. That's the problem. It could even happen with some scarce items that you buy that then actually they are not what you pay for it.
Yeah, and this happens to tourists all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like you go to India, you think you're buying like a whole ivory tusk of an elephant, and you find out that it's completely fake later. And if you watch those like pawn shows or something like that, that sort of thing happens to a lot of people. Thing is, wherever there is trust involved, you can get scammed, and a lot of people do get scammed. Whether it's modern art or even counterfeit currency or some centralized entity. If you trust somebody, well, they can abuse that trust and leave you holding a bag of something worthless. Yeah. And that's essentially what all of this stuff is vulnerable to. And the power of Bitcoin is that you're not vulnerable to being scammed because it's decentralized, digital, and scarce, and furthermore, it has very easy verifiability. You don't have to cut into a gold bar and assay it and do chemical tests on it in order to verify that it's actually gold. It's there, and there's no central controller inflating the supply, changing the monetary policy, saying that they'll go to a 2.0 with proof of stake and inflate the currency in some magical way that they determine beforehand. That's not necessarily good for you, but is great for whoever is on the foundation or something like that. These are all ways in which you can get screwed, and this is the power of Bitcoin, is that it's the one currency where you're not going to get screwed.
Exactly. So I think one of the important things that we should mention before we get into the Bitcoin design that you already kind of started to talk about is this concept of sound money. And there is a big issue. There always been a big issue. You go to school, they teach you everything, right? But they never teach you how money works. So you get to your 30, you start work, and you are looped into this system where you pay your mortgage, you pay your bills, you bring money to the bank, and then you got this massive tax, and you really are not aware of how the system works. And then Bitcoins come around, and all these conversations start to happen, and some people open their eyes. So tell me, what is sound money?
Yeah, the question that you really need to ask yourself before even sound money is, what is money? A lot of people don't understand money. They use it, and their credit card works fine, their checking account works fine, and they think they understand it because they use it every day. That's kind of like saying you understand energy because you know how to turn a light on. That's not what energy is. In fact, like, most physicists don't have a really good understanding of energy. I think Richard Feynman once said, don't believe anyone that tells you that they understand energy. Nobody understands what energy is. It's this sort of like, we know the properties of energy, but we don't know what it is. And it's the same with money. A lot of people know the properties, that they can go and exchange this piece of paper for this other thing, or swipe this credit card and get this other thing, or do an ACH transfer and get this other thing. But they don't really understand what money is. And at a core level, it is value that's stored for you to use later, so that you don't have to barter and rely on the other person needing whatever it is that you're producing at the moment to exchange for something else. So it's once you sort of start understanding what money is, then sound money makes sense, because most people don't understand what money is, but furthermore, they don't know how it works either, right? Like, how does money come into existence? How does it go out of existence? They just sort of assume that it's kind of like physical things like gold or something like that, where if you have a bar of gold, or if you dig up gold from the ground, that's sort of creating it. And if you lose it back into the sea or something like that in a shipwreck, then it goes away. That's kind of how money works, but not exactly, because the current system is a central bank-backed monetary system, and it's based entirely on loans. Most people think that when you get a mortgage, that there's somebody on the other side of a trade. That if you're getting a mortgage at, I think these days it's like 7 or 8% over 30 years, something like that, then you're going to. They think that somebody's on the other side of the trade, basically lending out, $500,000 at 7 or 8%. Well, that's not what's happening at all. And in fact, if you think about like what's happening in Japan, their interest rates are still super low. So, it's like 1 or 2% for a 30-year mortgage. There's nobody that's saying, okay, where can I make 1 or 2% over 30 years for my $500,000, where I'll get some tiny amount more after 30 years. No one's making that bet. The term is too long, the amount is too big, it's and the risk is too high for the returns that you're getting. Instead, all of that money is created into existence. The bank that issues you the mortgage makes it out of thin air. That money didn't exist before. And this is something that most people have no idea about. They don't understand how loans create money. And they think, okay, like somebody is on the other side of the trade. There aren't enough savers in this economy to do anywhere near all of these like commercial loans, government loans, like all bond issues, things like that. All of them rely on newly created money. When a business needs $100 million to expand, that money does not come from people that are willing to lend it out to them at like whatever the corporate bond rate is, or commercial paper rate is. That's not how it works. Instead, it's banks that create money on their behalf, and money gets expanded by that amount. That's how money works. And if that seems kind of unfair, that's because it is. Like the people with access to loans get however much money they need right away, and they have to pay it over. They pay it over time in a depreciating currency, so it's very advantageous to them.
So
but
Jimmy,
everybody else, yeah.
So Jimmy, it's kind of like the stock market. I mean, I've been working in the stock market for a long time, like helping PLCs and stuff like that. You issue shares like that, right? You issue warrants like that, and all this paper that gets created, and investors get diluted. I mean, it's not the same, but it's kind of like the same.
No,
concept.
it's very similar. In fact, the stock market is one of the places where a lot of these financial games get played to oblivion. So typically, or at least in the past, what a company had to do in order to raise more money was to issue more shares, like you're saying. And that used to require somebody's savings to buy that stuff up. And it wouldn't be new capital coming. It would be capital that was saved by other people. But nowadays, if they do issue new stock, that paper is paid for with newly created money. It's the commercial loan market, or some hedge fund doing some leverage play or something like that. And in fact, financial markets are where a lot of these loans go kind of haywire, right? Like a lot of hedge funds, a lot of high frequency trading firms and stuff, they use enormous amounts of leverage. And whenever you hear that word, leverage is just sort of loans stacked on top of loans. So, like your mortgage is 5x leverage. If you put 20% down, you're able to buy something 5 times more than what you can afford because of the loan that is made available to you. And that's a 5x leverage. For a lot of foreign exchange stuff, for a lot of the games that they play on Wall Street, it's like 10, 20, 100x on the leverage on whatever it is that they're betting on. It's newly created money, and not just money. Oftentimes it's like actual stock. So we kind of saw behind the curtain a little bit with the GameStop stuff. There was way more shares being shorted than there were GameStop stocks that existed. That means that they inflated the stock of GameStop without the corporation's knowledge. Like this sort of stuff is happening all over the economy. This is what we would call unsound, right? Like there's no bottom there. It's all sort of like made of nothing. Whereas sound money is something that has a basis, that has some link to reality, instead of sort of like games people play on machines and digits here and there and people sort of creating things out of nothing all the time. That's not what's happening in Bitcoin, and that's what makes it powerful, because when you have sound money, well, now you have opportunity cost, and opportunity cost is very important in any economy. What we have right now is the ability to create money out of thin air, which means that there's no opportunity cost for money. The reason why you're able to get mortgages at a fixed rate, essentially, that is more or less governed by the Fed, is because the government more or less guarantees whatever the mortgage is going to be, the rate that it's going to be. They provide insurance and all this other stuff. So So there's no opportunity cost. So banks don't have some fixed supply of money that they can lend out, and they, where they have to be discerning and look for the best opportunities to go and invest that money. They're not doing that at all. The way it works is that if you meet a certain qualification, then you can get mortgages all day long, right? Like if you have the right credit score and you have the right property and the right income and everything else, they can lend as much as they want. And this is actually kind of what led to the housing crisis in 2008. They lent out way more loans than they were incentivized essentially to give out as many loans as possible, because each loan was profit to the bank. And there was no opportunity cost. So when you lack opportunity costs for money, that essentially means that like everyone else kind of gets screwed, right? Like and suddenly some people can't pay it back and the bank becomes insolvent. They need a bailout, which means even more money printing. It becomes a complete kind of crazy mess. That's what sort of spread through the entire economy, not just in the U.S. but all over the world. And next thing you know, you had the great financial crisis. And, COVID sort of brought a very similar thing along the way, because you had all of these PPP loans. Where do you think that money came from? It didn't come from anyone's savings. It came from government sort of money printing. And it was done at banks for a reason, because the government basically said, you can go lend out this much to these people for, this interest rate, and we'll cover any losses that you might have. This is how Unsound money works. It gives power to the centralized controller, and your money becomes worth less and less over time.
I mean, in the US, you got lots of like checks sent out to people. In the UK, we got so many bounce back loan. They gave almost to everybody. And and then obviously, low interest rate on mortgages, the housing market that went through the roof. Now, now it's coming down. It's kind of like a very, how people can build a future on like an economy like that. When you think, right, I'm buying a house because I think that, the value is going to go up. In reality, there is no value that is going up because of inflation. So at the end of the day, if it's still the same amount of money that you paid when you paid, that you will be lucky. Anyway, so it sounds like sound money could be money you can trust because you can verify. I'm right to say that?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's money that you can verify, and unsound money is money that you can't verify. And the thing is, with something like the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England or whatever central bank, how do you verify the entire supply? How do you know that they're not creating lots and lots of money? And this is what libertarians have been saying for many years. It's let's go audit the Fed. Let's see how much money exists. Right? Like, let's just go find that out so we know the denominator. And, they do publish things like M1 and M2 and things like that, but we have no idea how accurate that is. We have no idea. And at least with the US dollars, there's an entire shadow banking system of like 100x leverage, like I was talking to you about, that it's money just sort of being created and collapsed all over Wall Street, and not just Wall Street. It's actually there's something called the euro dollar, which is kind of outside of the control of the United States. It's banks in Europe and other places that lend out in dollars, have some reserve in dollars, so they're creating dollars out of thin air too. So it's it's a complete kind of like shit show as far as knowing how much of it there is, and there's no way to verify it. So it becomes something that you essentially have to trust and go based on feelings or what might be and so on. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to plan that way. I'm sure people that bought like a year and a half ago when the housing market was just absolutely raging, they're probably regretting that now.
Exactly.
They're probably underwater on their mortgage. They're gonna have to figure out something because their housing values have gone down. Well, how are you gonna plan for that? And this is sort of like the situation that unsound money puts you in, is that you're so over levered that if anything goes wrong, your plans are completely kaput. And this is just sort of like the fragility of the entire economy today is that everybody is overlevered. I mean, it's not just at the personal level. Even if you don't own a house, you might be overlevered on credit card debt, right? Like you might be making, $100,000, but if you have like $60,000 in credit card debt and you have to like make payments and so on, or if that balance is growing, you're insolvent, and that's terrible. That's definitely the case if you own a house to a large degree, and I mean maybe you can make the mortgage payments or whatever. But a lot of companies, they're over-levered too, right? They took out a lot of loans, or they made risky bets, or they issued commercial paper, or they took on all kinds of different forms of debt, and they can't afford to keep operating. I mean, one of the things that in my research that I discovered is that airlines almost all lose money. Almost every single airline loses money, and this is crazy. But the way they stay solvent is by issuing airline miles. They're really banks. So like what they do is say they lose some amount of money on every seat that they sell, which is actually the case for a lot of these airlines, is that they're not making enough money, especially like the older ones. The one in England would be British Airways. In the US it's like Delta, United, and American. But a lot of these airlines, the way they make up for the shortfall is they sell airline miles to credit card companies who will buy them so that they can give you the 100,000 mile bonus for signing up for a credit card, and that's sort of like the incentive that they use instead of like giving you cash directly, because people want that. And so they issue extra miles, right? It's exactly like a central bank. They create the miles out of nothing, and it's sort of a future liability that they can hold off for a long time. And they debase the miles along the way, or make it very difficult to redeem the miles for flights or something like that. And they play all of these financial games to stay solvent. They're really banks that use flights to get rid of their liabilities.
That's why when you phone British Airways, you just want to put the phone down after
they want to make it as difficult as possible for you to redeem your miles. So the entire system, and I pick on airlines, but that's just one aspect. Every industry in the world has some level of financial games that they play that are similar. So if there's a lot of like leasing or financing available, they're probably playing some sort of game. At one point, the major U.S. car manufacturers like Chrysler and GM, they were making more money off of the financing, right? So there was something called GMAC financing, and they would offer attractive financing terms to people that couldn't afford it. Of course, that came back to bite them. And then, they both went bankrupt, and they had to get bailed out in 2008. But this is they're not interested in making better cars. It's actually like playing these financial games so that they get access to money earlier, or they use some sort of leverage in the economy to not have to run a very profitable business. So what you get are what I call zombie companies all over the economy. And I would classify airlines, I would classify a lot of car manufacturers, pretty much anything that needs a lot of state subsidization as a zombie company. And these are companies that are sucking value from the economy and not really contributing all that much. I mean, you might fly people from point A to point B, but if you're doing it at a loss, you're ultimately taxing everybody else to do it. And that's what a lot of companies in the economy essentially become in a fiat or unsound money economy, is they rely on this newly printed money to stay alive. And if they are, then they're not really providing value to anybody. They're a net negative, and everything gets subsidized, and you end up with essentially sort of like a quasi-socialism where these inefficient enterprises get subsidized by everybody else that's doing something productive, and that does not end well. Those types of economies tend to crash and burn, and we've had about 52 years of this stuff. The gold standard was completely abandoned in 1971 with Nixon cutting gold convertibility for other central banks, and since then it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And we might be seeing the reckoning right now, where you're seeing very high inflation all over the world. You're seeing a lot of places that are having to deal with it, and even as the Fed raises interest rates, you're seeing prices go up like crazy. It's it's not a sustainable situation, and I don't know if they can keep going.
Think even how many companies on the stock market, they are pointless. They have got no value. They are just there to pay the salary of the directors. What value is building there? They've got nothing to offer. I mean, this is worse than the airlines.
Well, it's actually even worse than that, because most people don't want to lose value through inflation, right? Like if you just keep it in dollars or pounds or euros or whatever, you're debasing at 7, 8, 9, 10, 12% every year. That's very hard to swallow. If the $100 that you had a year ago is worth roughly 90 in the economy now, just because all the goods all the prices of everything else went up. So in order to keep up with that, you have to go invest in something. You have to put your money to work so that you can keep up with this inflation. But there is no risk-free return. You have to take risks. And what happens to a lot of this money is that it finds its way to the stock market. So you have a lot of these companies that aren't doing very much, but they continue going up in price just because people have nowhere else to put their money. And that's essentially why the stock market has done so well since 1971. It's not so much because all of these companies are running efficiently. And if you work in any of these companies, you know how inefficient a lot of these large conglomerates are. It's because people have nowhere else to put the money. Yeah. So they're winning on the Cantillon effect in so many ways, because not only through government subsidies, but through all of this extra printed money having to go somewhere. And so their stock prices go up. And so they play all of these stock market games, like buying back their shares, right? Through some sort of leverage loan. So if you're paying out 2% in dividends, and instead you can get a 1% loan and buy back stock with that ends up being a better investment. And CEOs and executive teams having the incentives that they do, usually tied to the stock price, they would rather go and buy back stock from the market than create something more useful to the market, right? Like a better good or service. Instead, they'll just spend money on stock buybacks. Yeah. It's an entire fake game for fake money for fake everything, and that's essentially what an unsound money does, is it makes everything absolutely fake.
Yeah. I think there was a good digression to kind of explore this unsound money versus sound money. So going back to Bitcoin, I would like you to outline the key element of the Bitcoin design and why you think is supreme to anything else that is out there.
Yeah, the main thing that Bitcoin has, which no other asset has ever had and probably ever will have, there is this complete fixed scarcity. There's no chance of it going greater than 21 million. Now, with altcoins, with fiat money, with other commodities, there's always a possibility that it will go, the supply will go up. Gold, as you know, is mined all the time. There's new gold coming onto the market. I think last I checked, it ends up being about 2% of the supply of gold every year. Altcoins, if they're running some sort of proof of stake, there's always sort of new money sort of coming in. And no matter what the central controllers of an altcoin tell you, they can change the monetary policy whenever they want. And indeed they do. I mean, like Ethereum is a very good example of them changing the monetary policy about 30 different times through every different hard fork that they did. The monetary policy changed in each time. So there's no absolute scarcity in any of those things. But in Bitcoin, you have absolute scarcity. And that is a component of the design that we've never had before in honestly anything. We have 21 million, and it will never be greater than 21 million. And that's an assurance based on every node having to agree to upgrade to some sort of hard fork that would increase it. And that's sort of this consensus-based design, which is that if somebody decides, okay, you know what, I want a Bitcoin that's got 42 million instead of 21, I don't have to run that software. The software I run checks to make sure that it's exactly 21 million. And if it's not 21 million, it will reject any transactions or blocks built on that other assumption. And that's the key. That makes it very different than anything else. It's absolutely scarce because that scarcity is based on a design choice from an engineering perspective that that you can't go around, right? And that's the key.
And the proof of work, I mean, you mentioned proof of stake, and it sounds to me that everybody that want to experiment go proof of stake, and they've got so much flexibility, so much they can do. When you come down to proof of work, there are some compromise, but it's a much more democratic, consensus.
Yeah, well, I would put it this way: proof of stake doesn't solve anything. It doesn't solve anything. So the problem that Bitcoin is trying to solve with proof of work is that you need decentralized consensus. How can my node and your node, who might not be speaking to each other, know that we're on the same Bitcoin? That these transactions are valid versus these transactions which are not. How can we know that? And it's through proof of work that we can know that. If you rely on a central authority, that central authority is now the arbiter of whether or not something's a valid transaction. And if you, for example, if you write a check to somebody, and you write 2 checks, and you don't have enough money in your account to fulfill both checks, but either one of the checks you can fulfill with the amount in your account. Well, who decides who gets that money? Well, the bank decides. They're ultimately the ones that say, okay, well, this check is good and this check is not. They're the ultimate arbiters. They might be nice and even call you and ask you what you want them to do. But ultimately it's up to them. And they might base it on who brought the check into the bank first, or if one of the depositors has an account with the bank, maybe they prefer that one rather than the other one, and figure out which one bounces. That decision needs to be made. Now, how do you make that decision? It is the key to why proof of work exists. Proof of work is an objective standard. It's something that anyone can check, and no one needs any sort of authority to make work. Proof of stake relies entirely on authority. Somebody has to tell you what is correct and what is not. And in fact, proof of stake, the way it's designed in a lot of altcoins, doesn't even do that. It's some sort of like round robin majority or super majority signature thing, in which case they can sign multiple things. You sign 2 different checks, right? And at that point, they have to do some sort of fallback based on some other authority. And in fact, that is the design of a lot of these proof of stake systems is okay, how do I know what I'm signing is correct, right? Like the staking person, this is not an easy problem, right? Like how do I know? Because a lot of them have penalties for signing the wrong thing. If you sign the wrong thing and it can be proved that you signed the wrong thing, then some of the money that you stake gets taken away from you. So what do? Well, the fallback ends up being some other centralized authority. You have to go look up this other one and trust them, and they basically tell you which checks to let through and which checks not to. So it's a completely centralized system. At that point, you're kind of making some sort of Rube Goldberg machine that doesn't solve anything. It's completely useless.
It's like a DAO. It's like the DAO, one person, one vote.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that. It's just some completely centralized controller. Proof of work is objective, and that's why it's decentralized, because my node can check this, right? I don't need to go ask somebody with an authority. You give me the block, I can know right away whether or not it fulfills proof of work or not. I don't have to download some public key of some official or whatever. It doesn't. I don't have to trust anybody to do the right thing. All of these other systems, you have to trust somebody. And like I said before, once you add trust to the equation, where you have to trust somebody, then that's the person that can abuse that trust to screw you over. And in fact, that is exactly what has happened in a lot of fiat currencies and a lot of altcoins. That's exactly what a rug pull is. It's somebody that is invested with some trust, abusing that trust to screw you over. And that will happen over and over again until people learn, okay, don't trust these people, verify instead. And the only one where you can verify it yourself is Bitcoin.
So how Bitcoin is going to go mainstream, how more and more people are going to get onboarded to it. I mean, there is an education things, right? And then it tied up with regulation as well. I mean, it's not, they don't go together, but they kind of interlace. How we are going to get out the right word about Bitcoin, how we are going to onboard these masses in the right way.
Well, I don't, like, the answer I'm going to give is not going to be, that optimistic. Honestly, like, the questions like that come from people that are usually marketers that are thinking, oh, you know what? Like, if we just airdrop a bunch of Bitcoin to these people, then they will suddenly be on board Bitcoin. Or if we make the UX super easy, then they'll suddenly get on board with Bitcoin. My experience, that's never the case. The people that come to Bitcoin and stay in Bitcoin, not just get in and out in 6 months trying to double their money or something, are the people that actually understand what sound money is. And that is not an easy thing to understand. I just spent like the last hour talking to you about what sound money is. Yeah. And it takes a lot of learning, right? There's a reason why Michael Saylor says, you need to spend like 1,000 hours studying Bitcoin. You need that 1,000 hours to understand what money is, what sound money is, what hard money is, and what easy money is, what unsound money is. And until you really get that, Bitcoin makes zero sense. It's another plaything. It's another gambling vehicle, and that's honestly how a lot of people use it. And it takes a lot of learning to get there. So how do we get there? How do we onboard all of those people? Well, the best teacher in my experience is pain. You need to go through some pain. Yeah. You need to like get screwed over several times before you really learn. Okay, I need to understand this. Why does this keep happening? Why is there a financial crisis every 8 to 10 years? Why do these things happen?
It's true. And if I have got some money, where should I put them that I know that in 5 years I'm not going to get screwed again? Because you keep getting screwed in different ways. You exactly said it right. You said it right.
So it takes a long time, and the thing is, the class of 2017 they learned all about altcoins then, right? Because 2018 was like just a super scammy year, and they got screwed over, and they learned because their altcoins like dropped 99% or whatever against Bitcoin. This is how you learn. You need to kind of suffer some pain. Now, there are some extraordinary people that really get it or come from sort of an economics perspective and understand the argument. And I hope more of those people come around. But there's so few people that actually go that route. Almost always it's a lot of pain. Hey, my currency is hyperinflating, or I keep getting screwed over with the dollar. and they only learn because they have to, and that's what it's going to take.
I think the other point is, I mean, in my experience, is also about freedom. So you spend all your life doing things. It's not that all of your life, but you have to do things, and you are never free to own your money. Right? To have an asset that is actually gives you freedom. And kind of like Bitcoin is what is offering you.
Yeah, it does offer you some level of freedom because essentially you don't have to trust somebody else.
Yeah.
Once you trust somebody else, you are sort of tethered to them, right? Like you, whatever they do or wherever they go, you're going to have to follow them. And if there's inflation in the currency that you're holding, well, too bad. If the stock that you own, the CEO does something shady, well, too bad, right? Like you get dragged along with them in whatever direction that they go. So, this is the big problem. And the reason why, people will have to learn through pain because in many ways they don't understand money, and they purposefully don't teach you any of this stuff in school.
No.
And feed you lots of Keynesian propaganda so you'll be compliant and allow them to continue printing money and steal from you unabated. This is what people need to learn, and it's honestly, like I find it encouraging that a lot of young men get into this, because those are the people historically that have always been the people that forced the revolution in any country. It's always young men. When things get bad enough, those are the first people to rise up and do something, whether it's overthrowing or whatever. These are always the people that are at the front of the stuff. We say that Bitcoin is a peaceful revolution, and for a reason. You don't have to resort to violence. You need a lot of those young men in those other revolutions because they're the ones that are most willing to commit violence. And this is the one chance in history where we can have a peaceful revolution by having a lot of these young men basically opt out of the system and go to a different system where they're not constantly getting screwed over.
So, Jimmy, two questions to just finish up this great discussion. Now, your views on the Taproot Upgrade and what it led to, all this experimentation on Bitcoin. Is that good? Is that bad? Adds any value? What do you think about it?
Are you talking about Ordinals or something else?
Yes, I'm talking about everything that is blooming up on Bitcoin after the Taproot Upgrade.
Yeah, well, so it's not because of the Taproot Upgrade. All of the Ordinal stuff could have been done back in 2013. I know this for a fact because I worked on a project that did the exact same thing.
Okay,
it was called
cool.
Color Coins. And you could issue NFTs, you can issue alternate coins or security, whatever you want. You could do it back in 2013, and there have been multiple protocols on top of Bitcoin that have done exactly that. Starting in 2013, right? Like Mastercoin, Counterparty, many others, and like they're acting like this is something completely new. It's not, and it's not because of Taproot. The specific cost effectiveness of it using the witness field, that could have been done after the SegWit upgrade. It's not like Taproot related. They're just sort of marketing it that way to make it sound like it's something brand new or something exciting or interesting. The Taproot upgrade has many features that honestly I think will be very good for Bitcoin security. For example, you could have degrading multisig. So you can have 3 of 5 multi-sig. 3 of 5 people need to agree in order to move funds. But, that might not be the most secure way to do it, especially if somebody loses a key or multiple people lose their keys. So in that case, you could have degrading multi-sig. So after a year, it becomes 2 of 5. And after 5 years, it becomes 1 of 5, something like that. And those sort of features are very important for the sort of security use cases that we see going forward. Ordinals, BRC20 and all this other crap, that it's a complete distraction. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't do anything. It's another altcoin, centralized central bank like things that people are trying to issue. It's a get rich quick scheme. It's a scam. I don't think any of it adds value whatsoever.
So Jimmy, if I tell you Web3, what would you be your answer, your reaction?
VC scam.
Okay, good.
And I mean that it's kind of like the metaverse, or cold fusion or whatever. It's a narrative to get suckers to give them money. And it's like all of that DeFi stuff or whatever, completely useless. And go look at the actual projects and the usage and stuff like that. You see almost nothing other than financial speculation. And we talked about unsound money and sort of like the weird financial games every company plays. Well,
yeah.
This is sort of like a very pure version of that. It's nothing but games. There's not even a good or service underneath. At least with an airline, you still have to fly people from point A to point B. With these projects, there's not even that. It's just, let's play financial games on top of financial games with no reality backing it. And this is also why they fall down so quickly. It takes many years for airlines to go bankrupt. With these things, it takes like 6 months for a rug pull or something. It's insanely fast.
So Jimmy, tell me about all this. There is a big issue. The press and everybody talk about this big problem of energy consumption with Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. How do you think we are going to go about that? And is there a way to solve it? Or is it really a problem?
It's not a problem. It's not a problem. All of human history has relied on some form of energy. At the very beginning, it was based on human labor. So human labor is very expensive to hire. So if you till a field with like a hoe, it's very, very labor intensive, and you need to feed humans food in order to do that, and that's extremely expensive. Then came horses and bulls. You could do it much more efficiently with an animal, but you still have to feed them. Now, what you feed them is oftentimes much less costly than what you would feed a person, because bulls and horses are stronger, but that makes it more efficient. But then you can go even further with different farming equipment, and those things run on gasoline, and gasoline is way more efficient than feeding an animal or feeding yourself. The thing is, energy consumption ends up being a productivity multiplier, a giant productivity multiplier. And anyone that talks about energy usage being this way or that, and we can't spare it, well, they really don't understand the role of energy or what it is or how it works. These are the same people that think solar and wind are these amazing technologies. They're not reliable at all, and they almost always require some sort of fossil fuel based other energy source to balance it out. So really, the people that are saying that it's a problem don't understand energy at all, don't understand the economics, don't understand really like what the role of energy is. Really, these are the same people that are saying net zero or zero emissions by 20. If you understand anything about energy or what products use oil as an input, right? It's not just like gasoline or whatever. It's also like plastics. It's almost everything in your house that uses some sort of plastic or some oil byproduct that's used for it. And if you get rid of oil, gas, natural gas, coal, all of that goes away. Your modern life as as it exists completely goes away. So this notion that Bitcoin's using too much energy, they don't even have the right framework to evaluate energy. So for me, those arguments are kind of like a 5-year-old saying like, we're using too much sleep or something like that, or like we should stay awake all day or something. Yeah, you have no idea how a body works. I just don't give them any mind whatsoever, and I concede zero. I concede nothing. I will not say stuff like, Bitcoin is greener. It is, but I don't even concede the point that carbon dioxide is like bad for the environment. It's great for plants. So for me, all of those arguments come from a completely wrong frame, kind of like the people arguing Bitcoin is bad because it takes power away from the central bank or something like that. It's at that level of stupidity.
And regulation, right? Central banks, they own gold, right? Right now. Are they gonna put Bitcoin on the balance sheet at some point? Do you think a regulation will get them there?
I don't think it'll be regulation that'll get them there. Central banks more or less do whatever they want to do. They're independent entities. They're sort of like a quasi-public, quasi-private sort of entity in every country that exists. That has a central bank anyway. So are they going to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet? Possibly. It might be sort of a prudent thing to do. The reason why they have gold on their balance sheet is because they realize like they need some backing for the amount of money that they're printing, and the more gold they have, the better they can defend whatever peg they want for their currency and sort of manipulate the economy. Having that backing is very useful for that. If you have no backing, then hyperinflation is always sort of around the corner. So it's sort of like most central banks use gold as sort of insurance against hyperinflation. Now, will they start using Bitcoin as insurance? I mean, it's possible. There are probably some central banks that already have that, either through a sovereign wealth fund or something else. But does it matter? I don't really think so. I think fiat currencies are all destined to go to zero. The average lifespan of a fiat currency is something like 23 years. So that's their destiny. Now, the more interesting question is, will central banks actually have gold convertibility again, where some amount of the local currency can be exchanged for gold? The only way I can see that coming about is if an alliance like BRICS decides, okay, we want to compete against the dollar. The only way other countries are going to trust us more than the U.S. is by having a gold-backed currency. That's possible. I don't know if they'll do that. I think the sort of character of those countries tends to be more authoritarian, which means they're just going to sort of impose it on their populace and their spheres of influence, and I think that's the way that'll end up working out.
And some views on how regulation is going?
I mean, for altcoins, it's obviously been terrible. And Bitcoiners have been warning about that for a long time, saying you're centralized, you're pretending to be decentralized, and you have all these single points of failure. What do you think they're going to do? And we've been saying this for many years now. All these altcoiners are like, oh, Bitcoiners are statists or whatever, and it's like, guys, you're playing a stupid game of trying to get away from regulators by pretending you're decentralized, and it doesn't work. They're not buying it, and they're shutting you down because you're obviously scams. I have no sympathy for any of them, I have no desire to go defend them in any way with regulators. But I think what we are seeing is that countries that shut down Bitcoin, they're realizing it's not very effective. So China shut down all kinds of Bitcoin activity, starting in 2013, sort of culminating with making miners leave around 2020. But they're bringing it back because they realize none of that has done anything for them. They're still miners in China, some mining illegally. There are people that still own Bitcoin in China. They don't really they see the risk as worthwhile and so on. This is the thing about anything decentralized. It's very hard to kill it with a centralized order. Now, other countries, they put restrictions on. As far as I can tell, it's a very peer-to-peer thing. So most people don't really mind those things. So what you have are sort of bureaucrats going after altcoins instead because they're the much lower hanging fruit. So I think that continues. If they try to come after Bitcoin, good luck. I don't think it's going to do anything. But I think I'm in the same position as a lot of Bitcoin holders. It's if government does come after Bitcoin, I think it'll actually be really good for its price, because if it proves that it can withstand government attack, like, how much more can you trust it, right? If a government can't shut it down, I mean, this thing's like completely inevitable. There's no way it gets shut down by anybody.
So I was gonna ask you if you ever gonna sell your Bitcoin, but now I think I know the answer. You're gonna tell me no, because you're gonna transfer to your children.
Oh, no, I mean, I spend Bitcoin all the time, right? Like, because I need to eat and live and buy things.
So you basically use Bitcoin for your transaction?
I mean, not directly all the time, but like if I have a credit card bill due, I'll sell a little bit so I can go pay that off. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to use it, especially if you're very heavy in Bitcoin like I am. But I mean, there are other people that don't have quite the allocation to Bitcoin that I do, and for them, generally, they're going to want to keep the Bitcoin and spend everything else down first. So, but once you're kind of all in on Bitcoin, like, this is you do need to sell some to pay for your expenses, right? Like I have a lot of expenses that I need to pay for. At the very least, my what I eat, and my clothing, and my transportation needs and things like that.
So if you have to give an advice to people, they start to invest in Bitcoin now, can you share maybe some of your, for instance, what you are doing in terms of like storing, in terms of like, do you have them all on a cold storage wallet, or do you use them? So how what is the best plan when you own Bitcoin?
Hold it yourself and learn to get comfortable custodying your own stuff. And most people are absolutely frightened to do it, because I mean, it might be a substantial amount of money and you're responsible for it, right? Like, if you lose your private key, it's over. You don't get it back. So having a good security setup is an absolute must, and that varies according to who you are and what situation you're in. Maybe you do need like quick conversion abilities and things like that, in which case your setup's going to be different. But I do generally recommend that you custody your own coin. Bitcoin that you have on an exchange is not really yours. You're, again, trusting somebody, in which case they can abuse that trust and screw you over, like many exchanges have. So, don't do that. Hold it yourself, and verify it yourself, and create transactions as necessary. I think that's the real way to do it. Now, the specific setup, which hardware wallets to get, and so on. There are so many podcasts that go into that. What kind of multi-sig setup, and this stuff is always changing, right? Like I said, there's new upgrades on Taproot that haven't been implemented that could be potentially very useful for a cold storage scenario. 3 of 5 degrading over time to let you access to your own Bitcoin should you lose your key or something like that. And there are all kinds of things like that. That you have to take into consideration, but go find out the options and implement one of them based on your needs. That's what I would say. But hold your own Bitcoin.
Jim, thank you so much. This was an amazing conversation.
No, thank you.